This is the most misunderstood concept in Counter-Strike. It is the #1 reason your aim is worse than the pros, and it is probably why you are inconsistent from game to game. Crosshair placement is the most important concept for Counter-Strike players to understand, but almost no one actually understands how to practice it and improve it. In this video, I'll be showing you how to fix your aim and give you the secret techniques the pros use that you don't. So let's get started. The very first thing we need to understand is what actually is crosshair placement. Now, most people would say something like, crosshair placement is placing your crosshair at head height and shooting when people walk into your crosshair. Wrong. Well, kind of. Crosshair placement is a lot more in depth than you would initially think. The problem is most people learn crosshair placement kinda naturally as they play the game more, and that is fine, but it's super inefficient and you pick up bad habits from learning this way. Let's go through an example. In this round we have Nico, probably one of the best players of all time, and in this round he gets a really nice 4K holding car on Inferno. So when we first watched this clip, you may think that, he caught his opponents off guard with a nice angle and they couldn't get the trade on him, and that is probably partially true. But let's expand on this a little bit. First of all, why does Nico hold the initial angle wide like this? Earlier in this round, Nico's teammate dies at the bottom of Banana, and because of this, 9Z have a sense of urgency to accelerate into the B site and trade out what should be at most one player at the B site. So Nico is holding this initial angle wider than normal because he knows that the first player isn't going to be focused on hard clearing every angle perfectly. The first player is going to try and make space. And this is the first thing a lot of people don't think about. How is my opponent going to be peeking me on this angle? I see a lot of players holding the same angle the same way every single time, but it's different depending on the situation you are in. When you are in a situation where there are potentially going to be a lot of players pushing at one time, holding an angle slightly wider makes more sense, like in this example. But when we are just holding a position where your opponent is in no rush to peek out and make space, generally you should be holding these angles differently. For example, in this clip, Nico holds this angle with his crosshair much closer to the point of contact. And this is because he knows his opponent is not just going to wide swing out like in the previous clip. There is no sense of urgency here, and because of that, he knows his opponent is going to try and clear these angles in much smaller movements. So that's the first thing we need to think about. When we look at crosshair placement on the T side, generally this is actually going to be a combination of both movement and crosshair placement, because obviously you are actually going to be peeking into angles rather than holding them. A ton of players, and I mean pretty much everyone below the pro level, does not correctly optimize how they clear angles. Now obviously you don't need to clear every single angle every single time if you have confirmed information. And what that means is that you know where the enemies are based on utility, sound cues, or visual confirmation. Because of this, we can pick and choose which angles we should be clearing. In terms of aiming fundamentals, this is one of the most important skills you need to develop if you want to have insane aim. In this Donk clip, you'll notice that he pre-aims and then wide peeks onto these common angles in secret. And something you will notice when we watch this is how Donk actually peeks wide, then crouches into the contact point aiming at head height. When we compare this to how a lot of even face at level 10s or high level premier players clear these angles, you'll immediately notice a big difference. When Donk peeks into these angles, he is pretty much always going to win the duel versus a rifle because he is crouching under head height. This shot is even pretty difficult for an AWP to hit due to the slight peeker's advantage, and every single pro player is going to be doing this. Now, this type of segmented angle clearing is something you need to practice on every single map, but how do we practice this? So the best way to train a skill like this is using a tool like Refrag. This is something a lot of pro players use, like Elige, for example, on Complexity. So if I load up the pre-fire mode on Refrag, we can basically simulate this exact scenario where Donk was clearing secret. Now, it's really important to understand how we are going to be using pre-fire to practice these peaks. First of all, don't rush to complete the arena. You need to try and set up each aim duel before you actually peak. This is where your crosshair placement is super important. Remember, the goal here is to peek the enemy without having to adjust our crosshair as much as possible. We should be using our movement to aim here. So you swing, crouch, shoot. This is the formula we should be using to clear out these especially common angles. When we are talking about training our defensive crosshair placement, we can use a tool like Refrag's X X-Fire, which is one of my personal favorites. This is kind of like pre-fire, but it includes bots that are kind of peeking in to simulate a trade kill. So you have to get this first kill and then be ready for the second player swinging out to try and trade you. This is really helpful in training where you should be placing your crosshair as soon as you get a kill. Pro players are not wasting any movements with their crosshair. It's always going to be in a useful spot, and this is something you need to think about. Is my crosshair in a spot that is useful right now? And if it's not, you need to have it in your head that you should be having it in a spot that makes sense. I promise you, if you practice these core skills, you will improve your aim significantly, and a lot of players notice insane improvement very quickly just by using pre-fire, X-Fire, and all of the other modes we have on Refrag. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this, and also leave a comment describing what you are struggling with and what you would like us to help you improve. Thanks for watching, and peace out.